Hello and welcome to this special edition of SIAM in Action, the stories that shape us. My name's Steph, and in this spin-off series of SIAM in Action, Real Stories, Real People, we're focusing more on the people, their stories, their challenges, and the moments that shape them both personally and professionally. As part of Mental Health Week, we're incredibly proud to be joined by one of our SIAM community champions, David Barrow. David has spent over 30 years in the IT service industry, working in some of the most high-pressure environments. And today, he's joining us to share his personal journey of resilience, from managing global crises to navigating his own health challenges. David, thank you so much for joining us. Let's dive in. I want to start a little bit setting the scene with your career background. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what drew you into the world that you're in now and what the early years looked like?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for a lovely intro. It's really good to be here. The truth is that I fell into IT quite almost literally. I left school at 16, very little in the way of qualifications. I had very little care at school, to be perfectly honest. I loved the social aspect. Didn't really like the educational piece. It doesn't really work too well. And I've kind of always been that way, really. I just like people. So I basically went to a place where they taught us how to write a CV so we could apply for jobs. And I went to a small business for interview practice, and they said, could you build a PC? I didn't know if I could, but I said yes. And I went into a room, and there was a load of motherboards, a load of disk drives, a load of cases, and some, for those that are old enough to know, some MS-DOS and Windows 3.11 disks. And I built every PC in the room because it was actually quite easy. And then when they stuck their head around the door about an hour later, probably expecting to find me wondering what the hell to do, they were all built. And the only thing I did wrong is I didn't put the anti-static on myself, but I didn't blow up any motherboards. So all's well that ends well. And that was it, really. I ended up just working for this really small company in my hometown. They asked me to go and do a BTEC at college. I'd ride up there on my motorbike and look at motorbikes and ride home. Never went to it. So it got to the point where they were like, well, if you're not going to do the BTEC, we can't keep you on. And I didn't really comprehend it. So they didn't keep me on.
I did not expect this, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not a rebel or anything, but I just didn't want to go and do a BTEC in computing. It didn't interest me at all. They were really lovely about it, by the way, as well. Like I still know. I went to school with the daughter of the guy that owned the company, and I still know of her now. And I'm still sort of friends with mutual friends. I don't think we've ever spoken about it, but I basically left there and went and worked for another computer company, a company called Peak Software, and they installed computer systems across the UK in car garages. And I was like, this I can get on board with, because I can go to a garage, I can look at cars, and I got to like move cars about as I drilled terrible holes into walls, because I'm terrible at DIY. We quickly figured out I was really bad at that job, but the customers really liked me. And in a weird twist of circumstances, on a night out, some friends and I were on our way back. We were involved in a car crash. It wasn't too serious, but it was serious enough that I couldn't drive for a period of time. And so they put me on the help desk, and the rest is history. So now I was able to speak to the customers, people I'd already met. So I had an advantage on every single person in that room that was on the help desk, because I'd actually spoken to the people face to face. And the other advantage I had, and we could call this knowledge management if we want to stay on sort of SIAM and service management track, is I knew every single mistake that I'd made in every single garage when I installed their computer. So when they said something wasn't working, I could go, oh yeah, I know what I did wrong there, and I could get it sorted out. So it was just this weird little fateful series of events, never by design, never a plan. And there still wasn't a plan, but I arrived at an organization I'm sure everyone will know called IBM. I arrived there because I trained one of their service desks. There we are. Yeah, I'll come to that in a minute. I trained one of their service desks for a deal that they'd signed where weirdly they weren't allowed to look at the operating environment of another service desk. But IBM being IBM, they'd put in what we would call swivel chair, so there'd be enough people to go from one to the other. And I just trained them on how to use the common operating environment between the two, and ended up working on that team, which you see right there. So I'm at the bottom for anyone that doesn't recognize me without a beard. I'm
Cute.
19 to 20 years old there. The man on the left of the picture, Zaf, he was the best man at my wedding. We only ever met, he and the chap in the taller chap in the white shirt, Gary. He's my best mate's brother. So when he left school, I poached him and took him to Manchester and made him work on the service desk. Zaf lived in Fallowfield in Manchester, so literally he's amazing, and we employed him because he's amazing. But it helped that he lived in Fallowfield because it gave me somewhere to stay on a Thursday night when we went out. Ian in the middle, lovely chap. Bob was a stand-up comedian, and I still use his jokes to this day because they are proper dad jokes. And Aldona in the middle there, she was my first female leader. So she was the team leader, I was the deputy, and we had a great time. But that was also the first time that pressure and consequence entered my life, because we were dealing with a huge, globally renowned chemical and oils company. If something went wrong, it went really wrong, and we were responsible as major incident managers to put that right. So we had a lot of fun, a lot of nights where we just didn't go home, sometimes because of work and sometimes because we were out. I'd often sleep on the sofas in Jackson House, which is the IBM office, because the security guard would let me do so. But yeah, it was really good. But that was the first time that pressure kicked in. But IBM, we'll come to it later, but for a series of consequences, I ended up moving to London for IBM. And that's where things really changed for me, because it then became a career and not just an opportunity to meet my mates and go out for beers on a Thursday.
And you talk about pressure. Did you recognize that pressure at the time?
No, it was like water off a duck's back. I loved it. I didn't think of it as pressure. It was attention, to be honest. It was like, okay, it's all on me. I've got to get this sorted out. And as I said earlier, I genuinely like chatting and dealing with people. And so I could be on a bridge call at 4 a.m, talking to somebody about what we're doing, or whilst we're waiting for somebody to go and reboot a server. And I really enjoyed it. Didn't really hit me the fact that every minute that went by, there was probably a few £100,000 getting lost, or in some cases more later in my career, lives at stake. It was just get the job done, let everybody know that we're doing a good job, move on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. So I just lived in this cycle of, at that point, it was 12-hour shifts, day or night. You'd rotate, have 4 days off, go again. But yeah, that was just life at the time. And I was young enough and potentially silly enough that I didn't let it register just how important it all was.
And so was it like maybe a bit of an adrenaline buzz? Like, what point did you have to start building the resilience to be able to manage and maintain that sort of longevity in that role?
So it was an adrenaline buzz. It really was. And that's what I enjoyed about it. But the real, I guess, the turning point, if I look back, was when I was in London. I was looking after, as a major incident manager, a couple of deals, both of which had people, most importantly, and IT kit in the Twin Towers during 9/11. So I was the major incident manager, coordinating events on the ground in New York, coordinating events in the Disaster Recovery Center, as I was watching this world event unfold in front of me. And I also had people responsibility. So I was watching it on the screen. I'd never watched a major incident live, if that makes sense. I was always remote. Something's gone down, send somebody there, they'll reboot it, they'll do something. At this point, I'm watching these monumental events unfold, and I'm talking to somebody about how we're going to restart a server, or how we're going to get something out or get it onto business continuity. I mean, there was so much going on. It was servers, networks, devices. It was crazy. But it ended up becoming about people, because the operation had to move towards how are we going to reduce the impact on human life. And so that was possibly the first time. And I was doing some of it at home, some of it in the office, because it's one of those incidents you don't want to let go of it. You know, this is huge. And I recall, like, Emma, who would later become my wife, she was like, I can't believe you're dealing with this. I'm watching it on the news and you are one of the people dealing with it, only in a really small way, no way consequential to the firefighters and all the other people that were dealing with it. But that was the first time I was like, this job actually has an impact on world events, and world events have an impact on me. And that's the first time I had to develop resilience, because it was very sad to see what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from my memory, I was in school, so I guess we're a little bit different in age, but that is one of the biggest things that I remember, like, very vividly, seeing it on the news and seeing things happen, like, say, unfold, but not to be involved in it. And obviously there's a lot of people that were impacted by that event. But so how did you manage that moving forward, not only in the time, but also the aftermath of that as well?
Yeah, I think ignorance in a weird way, because nothing else was ever as important as that again, until slightly later in my career. So any major incident that happened after that just was no longer major to me. So again, I just resorted to, this is easy. But by that point, my career had started to change, because I'd met the woman that would go on to become my wife. We'd put a home together. It was suddenly, these other things now matter. They didn't matter as much as they should, but I started thinking, how can I get out of this grind of being the person that gets the call when something horrible goes wrong? And that's when I started to move into more of the, I guess you would call it, service management piece. So overlooking services and not necessarily dealing with incidents, but being an escalation point if needed, but handling more the people, the process, and all of the partners and the customers. So I went through a series of promotions. I was really fortunate that IBM gave me an education that literally I rely on to this day. I've never worked for an organization that is so efficient. So the education I didn't get at school, or didn't give myself at school, the opportunity to receive at IBM, I soaked it in, because I could see they taught me about contract law, they taught me about HR, they taught me about finance, they showed me how to write processes, how to execute against huge deals, and I still use those things today, to this very moment.
And just to come back a little bit then, because so like at school and you weren't interested in this, and like, is this all then coming back to the fact that you just found it easy, or what else changed?
I'd love to say I found it easy. I don't know if I did.
Well, there were elements where you were saying, it was easy. You just got it. You just picked it up.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you meant school. So school, I probably also found, I think school, I was just not bothered.
Didn't challenge you enough?
Possibly, yeah. Looking back, that could be the case. But with IBM, yeah, it was really challenging, and they set such high standards that I felt like I should try and attain them. And I really wanted to. But also they were just incredibly clear. Our objectives were linked to really clear things. So when we talk about today with SIAM and writing a collaboration agreement and a contract, it's no different. I knew what I needed to achieve to hit my goals, but it wasn't just me. Everybody in the organization knew how those goals linked with one another, so we could all achieve our goals.
Yeah.
And it was very much, people talk about top down and so on. This was very much bottom up. So we were given the opportunity to improve things. And when I say the opportunity, we were given the objective to suggest improvements. And if those improvements paid off, we received good bonuses, and we received kudos, and we received promotions, and it all just linked really well. Yeah. And as an organization, they are, for me, the most efficient organization I've ever worked for. And I've been striving to find that efficiency ever since. Equally, that efficiency meant that when I left, it was the best thing I could do, because I was operating in an environment of perfection, and the world isn't perfect. So when I left IBM, I discovered that I would have been 26 then. I took voluntary redundancy and went and worked in the city, where I discovered that things are very imperfect and very volatile and very emotional. None of those things existed at IBM. And that's really then when I had to start to develop resilience, because my day could be getting a big, huge clump of paper repeatedly thrown at me because a trading system was down, to getting that trading system up and running and literally being on somebody's shoulders with champagne getting sprayed. That wouldn't be an uncommon day. So in IBM, that would never happen. It just, you couldn't even think of that happening. But here in this scenario, it was very different. And that gave me a different type of resilience now, because I understood that perfection is actually quite rare. And so you can't implement perfection in an imperfect environment. All you can do is incrementally improve that environment to try and get it closer to perfection. And that's where you need to be resilient, because people say no, and they say no in different ways, less polite ways. And unfortunately, you have to put up a thick skin. And that's kind of where my first, I would say, resilience to pressure had to come in. And when I look back, I actually think all that was a defense mechanism, a shield, an ignorance that said, I'm not going to let anyone through. I'm just going to get on and do it. And I'm not sure that's paid me back in later life.
And you talked a little bit about, obviously, Emma, your beautiful wife, and what point then? So you were talking about doing these stupidly long shifts and this work that kind of maybe consumed you. How did that impact the home, David Barrow?
Yeah, well, that person. So my day, around the point we were getting married, I would be leaving home at 5:30 to get to work, and when I came back was debatable. It might be debatable because I was working, and it might also be debatable because I was going out, client entertaining and stuff like that. So I think how it made me was, it made me, I don't think I've ever been a bad husband or partner, but it made me less present. And also literally in the days leading up to our wedding, there was a major incident ongoing and I wouldn't let it go. So I was managing that the Friday before our wedding on the Saturday, with no real concept of how I would let it go, because I was so used to holding on to things that I wouldn't trust anyone else with it. And yet I was getting married the next day. And again, it didn't really impact the wedding day. My mind was fully present on that day, but the day before, my mind was everywhere else but that day. And that then piles the pressure on your partner, because then they're left handling something. And if you don't realize you're doing that, you're not really being a good partner. It may not be intentional, but I was unintentionally a bad partner in that period, because I was just working basically and putting so much importance on it that really was unmerited.
And I think, and I don't know if you experience this now, but I think we can probably all relate in a sense of kind of just still being in, I call it work mode, but going to working from home now. I work remotely, and before that kind of had hybrid throughout COVID and stuff, kind of jumping on a bit here, but it takes me a while to get out of that. And because I'm in my home environment, like I'm still consumed because I'm technically still at work. Yeah. So if you're working all the time and then like not really having that chance to switch off and be present and prepare for your wedding day or other major life events, it's really difficult. And I guess it's hard to navigate.
Completely. I mean, I've got my phone's always next to me, like as it is for all of us. But I have a genuine aversion to this thing ringing. Like, I detest when that rings, because I had a period of about 15 years of my life where the phone never rang with anybody ringing to ask me how I was. They'd always be ringing to tell me something was wrong and I needed to sort it out. And the reason I mention that is because even now, like, Emma will ring me on her way back from work, and I'll be like, phone call. Like, it's still it's like a natural reaction. I really want to speak to her, but I still have these kind of, it's not PTSD, but I still have these residual after effects of a phone call in the middle of the night is never going to be good news. A phone call is very often not good news, and I know that's not the case, but that's the way my brain's wired now. And I've actually been really fortunate that I've worked from home for probably the last 25 years.
Wow.
So COVID didn't change much for me. I'd go into the office a couple of times a week. But another thing IBM did all those years ago is they ran basically a productivity experiment, which placed a number of us at home and a number of us in the office. And they quickly determined over a period of 3 months that those that worked at home were able to offer more and suffer less. So what I mean by that is they were equally, if not more, productive. They didn't have a commute, all the stuff we know now. They could log on earlier, log off later, and have a bit in between for their own selves. And we were more productive than the people in the office because they were tired when they got there. They spent the first half hour making coffee, making breakfast, and doing anything but work. Then at lunchtime, they took a bit longer. And in between lunchtime and the end of the day and lunchtime and the beginning of the day, they just had corridor conversations, just like we are now.
Yeah.
And so their productivity was low.
I was going to say, you still feel guilty though if you like take it. Well, I do. If I take longer, and I'm like, I suppose I would be having that casual chat and conversation if I were in the office. Or it's a switch, isn't it? But for you, I guess you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, and so COVID didn't really change anything for me. I mean, but I do completely agree that there's a lot to be gained from being in an office and having FaceTime. But again, the other thing IBM taught me is there's no point in going to a meeting unless there's a series of outcomes or an agenda that leads to outcomes.
Yeah.
So what tends to happen now is people will go into the office and they'll just spend the whole day either sat in a meeting or sat on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why not set the day aside with a series of objectives and outcomes that a team can achieve by being together?
Yeah.
So organizations still think that having bums on seats is a good thing. It's not. It's a waste of ground rent for one. So IBM started looking at their building profiles and saving money that way. But I guess my real point is you're applying another pressure on people that they don't need. The pressure to be somewhere when they get there, they don't actually get anything out of it. And therefore, neither do you as an employer. So if you set up an away day or you set up a day, do something with it. Make it productive. Have a series of outcomes. Make people feel energized when they get there. It's no different to a conference. People go there because they want to go and learn. So do exactly the same. Apply the same principles, but give them something that when they leave at the end of that day, they're not going to go, well, that was a waste of my day. They're going to go, that was really useful. I can't wait for the next time. That's how you create a culture of people embracing hybrid working rather than just dragging them over and just putting their bum on the seat and having them on a Zoom call all day. And I think it's another level of pressure that now exists for this generation of workers that didn't exist for mine.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. Because I just won't allow it to exist for me. It's one of the reasons I'm self-employed. I will go happily to any client and I'll sit with them and I'll get to know them and I'll do whatever they need me to do as long as I know what they need me to do. If they just want me there because they need my face in the room, then I'll have an honest conversation with them and say that's not something that's productive for any of us.
Yeah. No, I think it's good. It's good to push back and have those boundaries and make people ask themselves that question rather than just do it because it's habit or it feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so coming back to then, so we talked a little bit about your wedding that actually you made it to.
Yeah, did make it in the end.
Mentally present. And can you just tell us a little bit about this picture and who the superstar is just boarding his helicopter casually?
So this is Emma and I. We got married in a small village, and unbeknown to us, my father-in-law arranged for this helicopter to land in a farmer's field. And I only discovered this as we were leaving the church, and one of my friends, who was typically late, actually it was Gary from the first picture. So Gary from the help desk on the first picture was stood outside. And as I said, Zaf was my best man. And he said, "Are you leaving in a helicopter?" And I was like, "No, don't be stupid." And we were. So Emma's father had arranged this. But in my right hand, you can't quite see it actually, but in my right hand are 3 glasses, 3 champagne glasses, one for me, one for Emma, and one for my brother-in-law. And when we took off, I could see Emma's father waving at us with the bottle of champagne in his hand. And I was literally imploring the pilot to land it so I could get hold of that champagne. because I had a long day the day before and I needed a drink. So yeah, that flew us to our reception. Our reception was barely half a mile away, so we went all around London and came back.
Wow.
Only to find everybody absolutely smashed in the hour we'd been away. And and the irony of the picture always is that my father's in the Air Force, and so routinely as a child I'd be in and amongst helicopters. So for me it was a lovely thing. It was beautiful, but all I really wanted to do was join everyone else with the sangria at the wedding. But it was really cool.
I love that. Very nice. And nice that I love that you said when you were there, you were mentally present and you could kind of ignore what had been building up to that and what had happened, you know, the days, the hours before actually being there.
Yeah. And tell you what, Emma won't mind me telling you this because it's really relevant. Whilst I'm off doing my job and doing what I was doing, Emma developed like a red eye. She got bad skin. Her hair started falling out because she was taking on board all the stress that I wasn't. So that's where I wasn't a good partner. And so, you know, Emma's smiling in that picture, but her morning was awful compared to mine. Mine was roll out of bed and turn up at the church. Emma had so many things going on that, you know, for her to enjoy that day, if I look back, I'm like, I really wish I'd have made more effort to help Emma enjoy that day because she was suffering during that period.
Yeah. And I guess sometimes, you know, like you were saying, you don't always notice it when it's happening. And the same for the flip side. Maybe Emma didn't recognize that in the time. And I think the body presents it in different ways, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But, you know, from the stories that you've told us, and I don't know if there's anything that you kind of want to share still about your career before we move on to your personal journey at the moment, but you've managed some major global events and taken on a lot of pressure throughout that early stage of your life and built a lot of resilience throughout that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to touch on before we move into when things kind of got a little bit more personal and perhaps changed for you?
Yeah. I think the only other one that's really worth mentioning is when I worked in London, I was present during the events of 7/7. So that was the London bombings.
Wow.
I was actually on the train on the way to work from Brighton when I got the phone call to say, "Where are you?" From the head of facilities. We've been informed that there's a terrorist event that could happen today. So there was already a bit of an advance warning. And I was so far up the track that I just went into the office. And in going into the office, then found myself amongst a number of people, not just me, kind of trying to find out where our people were. So you've got people traveling into London, all coming through that area of London. We were really fortunate as an organisation and as a circle of, you know, colleagues and friends that we didn't lose anybody that day, but we had a number of people that were right there as people were lost. So you're now handling the fallout of that. We had to evacuate our people. We had to make phone calls to people to stop them coming in. We had to do all of that whilst we also kept trading systems running, which was kind of mad. Now I look back at it. So we're keeping the lights on so that when events settle, that place can trade and continue to function as a business, whilst we've got people going out into different DR sites and turning round and observing and being present when terror is happening. I remember that day really vividly, in that we got what we thought, everything was under control, everyone was trading. But I remember getting on the train back on the way home. I always had to come into London Blackfriars before it looked like it does today. And I remember sitting on that train and just bursting into tears because it all just built up during the day. And I hadn't even reacted. I'd just gone on autopilot through the whole day, me and many others. I want to be really clear, it wasn't just me. There was some fantastic people who did a lot more than me that day. But just, all the way home, just thinking, I'm not sure I can come back here again. I don't know if I can ever do that again. Unfortunately, I've never had to. But yeah, within a year, I'd left that role because I couldn't handle that trip back so much. It wasn't like any form of breakdown. It was just an element of doubt that what could happen today. And I'm close to it, and it's self-preservation, I guess. So I ended up working, taking on a role that was closer to my home in Brighton, but eventually being able to go back into London and work there without that worry, because time is a great healer from that perspective.
Yeah. Wow. You've already lived a life, and we've not even got into the later part of where you've. I mean, yeah, it's admirable the work that you've done and the things that you've been involved in, and to kind of keep pushing through it, I guess. And
yeah, but I mean, for me, I mean, it sounds flippant, but they're two big world events that me and goodness knows how many million others were impacted by. Outside of that, everything else just felt okay. All right, so the trading system's down. All right, fine. Or, we're about to lose $1 million deal, whatever. It just sets I think it sets your parameters a little bit differently, and your element of feeling pressure. But I think for me, yeah, it definitely built a resilience to pressure. It definitely did. But I'm not sure that was a healthy resilience. It was more an ignorance of its coming on. I remember in 2013, 2014, suffering from migraine. No, sorry, it was 2010, suffering from migraines. And they got that bad that I went to the doctor and they had to test me for a brain aneurysm. But when I look back, I know exactly what it was. It was pressure. It was stress and it was pressure, and I wasn't hitting the release valve. So we went traveling for 7 months so I could hit the release valve. That's what we did. That was the response.
I remember you telling me about that when I met you at SurVision, because I feel like that. Yeah, we met a couple of years ago now, but I loved that. I think obviously we're not all necessarily fortunate to be able to do that, but it's good that you recognize that and hit the release button.
Yeah, but I don't know if I did at the time. I just knew I had to do something different, so that's what it was. And I was really fortunate. I had an employer in Capgemini that gave me a sabbatical. And really fortunate that due to world events in a weird twist of fate, mortgages were at their lowest ever, so we were able to literally just allow someone to live in our house and look after our cat while we went gallivanting around the world with our friends. And it's still the best thing I've ever done, because that then gave me a perspective on life and culture that I just didn't have before. I was quite closed off.
Yeah. Is this where you saved an elephant's life?
No, that was in work a year or two before or after.
Sorry,
major incident.
just jumping around there. I remember that being your fun fact when we first, well, the early days of meeting you. But
I guess I need to tell people very quickly.
Yeah, I know.
It's in my book on education and service management, but I will tell you. Basically, there was a volcanic undersea eruption which hit the Indian subcontinent. In doing so, it broke a load of cables into my client, so the cables needed to be repaired because they were network cables. And for those of you that don't know, still to this day, a lot of our continents are just connected by cables for the internet. And a lot of Africa actually needs upgrading because the internet service is so poor there, because the cables that connect it are really poor. Different story. But in this case, the cable had broken under the sea, and in India, where it was run across the floor, it had been broken by an elephant that had been shaken onto its haunches and broken its leg. So I technically saved an elephant's life by using the bridge crew and the contacts in India to find a tractor that could lift the elephant up and get it to a vet. And I technically, and there's definitely, if anyone's listening, I'm definitely doing inverted commas here, saved a diver's life, because they wouldn't dive because they were surrounded by sharks. So we had to find somebody that could come and get sharks away from the boat so they could then dive and sort the cable out. And that was a good 48-hour bridge with a wonderful guy called Joe in Texas, who you could hear his hammock swinging and him spitting his tobacco out whilst crickets were in the background. And I remember Emma saying, "You've got the most bizarre job," because that's what I was doing for a period of time.
Honestly, all these things are just, like loads of people's lives in one almost. You've lived a lot.
the joys of a major incident manager, I guess.
Yeah, I love it. It's exciting. Well, comes with its downfalls as well, I guess. But yeah, so like I say, I met you at SurVision, so this was a couple of years ago, and found out about the elephant life saving, which is great. And I was building the Scopism SIAM community, learning a lot from you. I think you were talking about co-creating value and communities of practice there, which was really insightful. And our relationship has evolved. We work together in the community, and I learn a lot from you, so much from you, and I've followed you closely over those 2 years. But obviously, a lot's changed, I guess, for you. And I don't know how much you want to share about how things had to change from that work environment and the career, because obviously you're still in your career. But yeah.
Well, I think the first thing to say is you've done an incredible job creating the community, because I remember your concern around that, and coming into the role not really understanding or feeling like you didn't understand service management, and then creating, what have you got now, nearly 2,500 members in the community?
3,500.
3.5. Wow.
Yeah.
So in 2 years, you mean, I'm not even sure there's 3,500 service management people in the world, but it seems there must be, and you found them all. So I think, firstly, before we talk about that, credit to you for creating that community, because I know how concerned you were, and look where it is today. It's incredible. And for anyone watching, you should definitely join the community if you want to learn about SIAM or biscuits. We can do biscuits another time. But for me, so my life changed basically around October, November last year. I was diagnosed with bowel cancer. After a few months of feeling poorly. It still strikes me as mad that literally this time a year ago I was preparing to run an ultra marathon with a tumor inside me that the very large surgeon said was half the size of his fist. And for comparison, I said my fist or your fist, and he showed me his giant fist and went mine, which was bigger than mine. So so that was, and I guess the point of me being on the podcast today is to talk about how we've talked about how I've dealt with all of these events and built a resilience, but none of that mattered. Literally none of that mattered when I found out I had cancer. So because I lost control, as in I lost control of my body, I lost control of any outcome. I had to place all of the control into other people's hands, and that freaked the hell out of me. I nearly swore there. It really freaked me out because I couldn't control any of those things. I had my very own major instinct going on in my body, and there was nothing I could do about it. And not having that control was something I've never experienced before. And I think the important part to say here is resilience in this case didn't matter. I didn't really have a coping mechanism, but what I did have was people I could trust to speak to. So including yourself, Steph, and Claire, because it happened right before Service North and I was due to come up. And I remember feeling compelled to send you both a message to say, I'm not going to be there, and then thinking, should I say why? And I think if you develop a relationship with people and you can't trust them, then why have the relationship? So I knew when I sent you and Claire that email saying, because I'm just waiting on a cancer diagnosis, I knew I could trust you. There were other people in my life that I knew I could trust. But it really impacted me. So I was supposed to be speaking in Finland that week. I was supposed to be coming to Service North. I had another speaking gig, and then I've got a job to do. And suddenly those things just become a sideshow to this thing called cancer in my case, where I'm getting presented with stats that I've never heard of before and medical terms I don't understand. And suddenly Google becomes a place I go to, which I probably recommend you don't do. And yeah, there was so much going on. There was a release of a book at the time that I was co-writing with Lucy. But weirdly, in a mad twist of fate, Lucy, another lady called Susie, who's my current client, and probably Emma for all these years, had been talking to me about the power of positive thinking, or I've later come to understand it as abundant thinking, and Reiki, and things that I'd never really felt connected with, but I had an interest in. And through their advice, I was able to start regaining some form of control, and journaling as well. So I think my point is you think it's all good until it's not. And then when it's not, how you deal with it is like no one teaches. IBM couldn't teach me that one. That's one I had to learn for myself. And that's now been going on since November. So I've been through surgery and now I'm having chemotherapy.
And I suppose, like, I know you talked about the positive thinking and side of things, and having that community around you, people that you can trust. But going back to the migraines and having those tests and stuff, how does this differ from that? Because I suppose you had your 7-month break and you did traveling and stuff. How do you feel like it's obviously very different in the diagnosis, but how did that feel? Like, how did you navigate that in comparison?
I think my instant thought then is I wonder if it's karma, because with that one I got an instant diagnosis of don't worry about it, we'll monitor it, and then went off for 7 months. And maybe karma's gone, right, well, you had that great time, now here's 6 or 7 months of bad times. I'm not sure, actually. I just literally just came into my head. I think the difference then is I was able to get away from it and literally put it to the back of my mind through not having to be present, through learning new things and soaking up new culture and just drinking it all in, quite literally in some cases. Whereas with this one, I can't get away from it. I cannot get away from it. No matter where I go, it's there. So firstly, it was inside me, and I thought, okay, I can handle that. Like all I've got to do is get to the operation and they'll cut it out. And then all I've got to do is recover. So it was physical. There was a bit of mental there. Certainly the worst thing about any diagnosis is the waiting for it, and then the waiting for the treatment plan, and then the waiting and the more waiting. It's horrible because you're not in control. But I was able to control my physical wellness. So I actually stepped up my running. I did some of my best 5K and 10K and 15K times of my life in preparation for the operation, because I was able to, in my head and when I was outside, verbally scream at the cancer. I gave it a name, and I was able to tell the name to get lost in no uncertain terms. Since it's left me, so to speak, I can't do that now, because it could be hiding inside me somewhere. That's why I have to have this chemotherapy. So now it's a series of what ifs. What if it comes back? What if it metastasizes? What if they find this? What if they? So, and again, I'm out of control. But to bring it back to something valuable, this book here, The Source, this was recommended to me by a friend. It's by a lady called Dr. Tara Swart. Has been really, really great for me, because I joke that I've probably written more books than I've read. I think we got the clue earlier that I'm not great at being educated. But with this, it's educated me. So this and Lucy, who I've co-written a book with, and Susie and others, and there's Lucy and I speaking at SITS last year. And I just want to use the opportunity to thank Lucy, because Lucy, we talk about allyship, Lucy and I. I'm not going to try and sell the book to you. That's not the point. But we talk about allyship. Lucy has been an incredible ally because she's listened to me. And it's really hard. Lucy and I talk about it a lot. When you try and help somebody, you instantly want to give them an answer or a solution. The only people that can offer me that in this case are the surgeons and the oncologists. What Lucy gives me is a listening ear, an understanding, a check-in, a little message here, a little message there, a little bit of support. And during the time when we were releasing the book, that's when I was getting the diagnosis. And Lucy said to me, we can stop this right now if you want to. We could just forget we ever did it, and we could come back to it if ever we need to in the future. And I said, no, we need to do this. But having that ally in my corner, having someone like Lucy in my corner, has just been invaluable for this whole piece. So this is a massive thanks to Lucy, and to everyone else that's been so kind as well, but especially Lucy. But yeah, so having this power of abundant thinking, which this has taught me, and for anyone watching who's a bit like me and goes, well, what do you mean thinking positively? It's not that at all. It's looking at a scenario and thinking what's the best that can happen, as opposed to what's the worst. So it's an element of rationalization, and I've just found it so useful, because now I can search for what the best is going to be. I've got all of my medical records now. I know exactly what they found and what I've got, and now I can use. And I don't recommend Google, but actually, if you use something like Perplexity AI or even ChatGPT, if you use it intelligently and ask it informed questions with informed information, it can give you really good answers. They might just be useful at 1 a.m. in the morning when your head's spinning, and that's what I've been using it for. And that's got me. Lucy also gave me the advice to journal. So writing things down and just getting them out of your mind, so powerful. So it's been easily the toughest period of my life. There's zero doubt about that. But also I've discovered in this last 6 or 7 months just how incredible people are. So the people that have been supporting me, have been asking after me, who've given me opportunities like this, yourself and Claire and Tim at the ITSM, people that have just been right with me and not asked much of me, but also not treated me as though I can't do anything. I think it's such a delicate balance. And none of that resilience I built up as a major incident manager has been helpful, apart from being organised. That's probably the only one.
Well, I mean, I think it speaks volumes, like how you've managed to kind of absorb what's going on, but still navigate and find things like journaling that you would have maybe dismissed years ago, and managing something like major incidents. I'm not going to journal about it. What's that? And thinking positively, because that's not going to get it done. But this is something, like you say, that's out of your control, and you've had to kind of shift and try new ways and add new things to your toolkit, I guess.
Yeah, completely. I've had to not necessarily change my mindset, but in the last 5 or 6 years, I've definitely adapted, what I want to do. So I've gone from being that major incident manager and a service manager to wanting to help other people be better at those things and to get into that role as well. I love nothing more than developing somebody who shows a passion for what we do, because what we do as service management professionals is actually really, really important, because it does save lives, albeit indirectly. It does save industries, businesses, possibly entire countries. That's how important what we do is. But it's not as important as health and as love and, of being there for one another. So I'm now able to start combining through this diagnosis and what I've been doing in the last few years about education and bringing people into the industry and developing people and mentoring and talking. I think I can now add another layer on that, to which is this stuff's really important, but actually it's not. This stuff is really important. And how do we find that balance, and how do we become better for one another? And genuinely, this is why having something like this community is so useful, because through this community, and I'm not going to name names, but they'll know who they are, I've been able to connect with people suffering similar challenges to me, who have rightfully chosen maybe not to be public about what they're talking about. That I make my choice. That's my story to tell. Other people have a story that they may or may not want to tell, and it should be completely respected, whatever they choose. But we've connected and we've spoken and we've shared experiences, and we've done that because of this community, genuinely. So I think that's why the community, and I'm not trying to sell your community to anybody, just this is literal truth. That's why having a community is so helpful, because you can get help on an incident process, for example. You can get help on how to run a major incident, or you can connect with a like-minded individual who understands the unique pressures you face in your career, and also, in this case, the even more unique pressures you're facing due to your health. And I think that's why we need more communities like this, not just in service management, but just generically, communities for men to share and speak and talk, communities for women to do exactly the same, and then communities for men and women to get together and do that, no matter what we do, or just to talk about biscuits, frankly. Steph and I often talk about what's the best biscuit, and we do it often in the SIAM community. But little things like that will distract me for 10 minutes while I go out and search for a biscuit, and I'm not thinking about cancer. And actually, it's so incredibly useful.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you were talking about, people dealing with things differently, and everybody does, and hopefully people listening to this can take something away to think, I'm not alone, and that's the sense of community that we want to create. I love my job so much because everybody is so unique and they do come for a different reason. And I'm not saying that people come to confide in me about things, but it's that they have the confidence, the trust that they can talk to me about anything. And if that's supporting them in finding a new role, or helping, overcome a challenge that they've got at work or a personal issue, the community is so open for everybody, for anything that they are going through, and to support each other. And I love that that's been something for you that you've really got from it.
Absolutely.
And biscuits.
And biscuits. Hey, I've got a cupboard full of great biscuits now, so I'm not gonna complain. But it's genuinely true.
Good. I'm glad. And so obviously there are people listening to this, and there will be people that are interested, and you've talked a lot about your career and the things that you've gone through, but also anyone that's sort of struggling in this way silently, what advice might you offer them in addition to the things like you've said?
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing is that everyone's different. So the thing I've discovered in this whole thing, I've met a few cancer patients now and a few people suffering with other things, is we all approach it differently. But my advice, and it's been kind of universal in the conversations that I've had, is to write down how you feel. If you've got nobody to tell, write it down, because it really, really helps. And even if you think you've got nobody to tell, there's charities like Andy's Man's Club out there, which are really great. There's the Samaritans, obviously. If you're a cancer patient, it can be really unclear, but there are charities like the Maggie's Centres, which are incredible, and the Macmillan Centres, which are incredible. Macmillan will always have a nurse you can speak to. If you just go online, you can chat over a chat bot if you're feeling a little like you don't want to converse, or you can speak in person. They have counsellors. They offer Reiki, they offer yoga. All of this is free for cancer patients. Equally, it's all there for anybody supporting a cancer patient. So if you've got a friend or a family member and you don't know how to deal with them, and you want to learn how to deal with them, go to Macmillan. They will help you. And they are so, I'm amazed that here in the UK we have something like this. I can't speak for the rest of the world. But my point, I would just say, for you as an individual, journal. If you've got somebody you can speak to them. And if you're the person they're speaking to, my advice is don't try and offer them a solution. Just offer them an ear and just listen to what they say, because sometimes just getting it out is nice and easy. And failing all of that, those charities that I mentioned a moment ago. I
love that. And just while we're here, because when we were starting this, actually at the very start of this call before we went live, we talked about the series name, and it was originally going to be The Stories That Shaped Us. And I like that you suggested changing shaped to shape, because we're still being shaped. So what advice would David Barrow of today give to his younger self?
Well, my younger self saw things in moments. Probably, actually, when I say younger, I probably means about 10 years ago, if I'm honest. Probably till I went traveling. So when you look at life in moments, you've got ups and downs. We all suffer ups and downs. I mean, there's no way of getting over the fact that life is not perfect. But what I've learned over these last few years is if you just step back and look at your life a little differently. And the reason we talk about shape is the shape that I want to see over the next few years for myself and for everybody I love and confiding in friends is just growth. And growth for me looks like just a slight upward curve with a few dips and a few peaks and a few troughs in it. But ultimately, if it's a slight upward curve and you're going in the right direction and you're comfortable and happy with that, I believe I would say to my younger self, step back and take a look at where you are. And I'm going to use it ITIL stuff now. Where are you now and where do you want to get to? And if you're continually evolving and changing where you want to get to, but it's always level or upwards, I think that's a great shape to be in. And embrace the troughs, because they're probably what form you as you get older. I'm certainly hoping this one informs me. And I'm hoping I'm around long enough afterwards that I can look back on it and treat it as a learning experience. Because having to get in touch with my mental health has been interesting for these last few months. But that's what I was telling myself the other day when I was having a moment. I'm on the upward curve, and allow the moment to happen and then move on.
I like that. Very powerful. And you've got 3 books to write, so I'm excited to see them. Is there anything you would like to share with our listeners at this stage? Obviously, we've for those that don't know, David runs a Substack, and we've been following in his blogs. But Anything you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not here to sell, but why not?
It's not about selling. We just love to hear it.
I have a Substack which is basically the journals that I've just talked about. So the Substack is sh''T. I've got cancer. That's my first reaction that I had when they told me, and it's also apt because of where the cancer was in my bowel. That Substack has now been picked up and it's going to become a book. It's actually going to become 3 books. So book 1 is going to be about my diagnosis and everything that goes with that, the surgery and preparing for it and the recovery. And it's my daily diary. So it's all written in the moment. So the challenge I set myself is to be raw. So if you read it, you're reading my thoughts that day. You're reading about those peaks and troughs. But hopefully from one end to the other, what you're going to read about is a slight upward curve. So book 1 will be diagnosis, surgery and recovery. Book 2 I'm in the middle of writing now. It's chemotherapy. And when I say in the middle of writing it, I've got 35,000 characters already because I talk a lot about chemotherapy in the book. It's the most weird thing that's ever happened to me in my life and makes surgery look like a walk in the park. Part 3 is still to be written. So I've got an idea of what it's going to look like. I've got a hope of what it's going to look like. And I'm hoping that will be something that talks about how to handle the mental side, how to handle PTSD, which invariably comes with surviving something. I'm going to invite people to contribute to the book, and I'm planning on a couple of challenges to give myself when I'm physically able that I will document during that book. The book is in partnership with Bowel Cancer UK Research too. So when it's released, a good portion of the profits are going to bowel cancer research here in the UK. And I hope people will pick it up and read it just to read about all of that stuff, or just to support Bowel Cancer UK. That would be incredible.
Love that. David, thank you so much for joining us and being so open and honest and sharing things like this that are so vulnerable. And hopefully our listeners take something away from today, even if that is just a little awareness of those around them as well. We'd love to hear from you guys. Feel free to reach out to us. We're both in the community, and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.